Lift up the word and repeat after me. I believe, this is the word of God. I believe what God says because it is impossible for God to lie. Well, today I want to talk to you about a subject that's kind of considered taboo in church. And it's a subject that's often ignored because if you talk about it, people think you're a conspiracy theory nut, or they just think you're a nutter. But I think it's something that needs to be addressed in the church because church people get asked questions, and when church people don't know the answers, it makes people think that church people are stupid, and church people aren't stupid, you know. In fact, if you've received Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you're one of the most intelligent people out there because that's the smartest thing in the world and the wisest thing in the world you could ever do. But when it comes to, and you've heard me talk about this before, about things in space and the size of the universe and the creation of the earth and that type of thing, true science and true Bible, now I say true science and true Bible don't conflict. In fact, every time that science comes up with a new discovery, it complements the Bible if the discovery is true. And we know that over the years, there have been a lot of things that science, earth science, medical science have come up with that haven't necessarily been true. Last night I was watching a commercial from the 1950s on YouTube, and it was talking about how Lucky Strike filters were the best cigarette for pregnant women. And that 5 out of 6 doctors agree that pregnant women should smoke Lucky Strikes with filters in order to ensure the healthiness of your child. Well, do you think science, medical science, has even changed in our thinking? Yeah, we know more now than what we used to know. But today I'd like to tackle the subject of UFOs and the Bible, what it means to us as Christians. The military now and the government have decided to no longer call them UFOs. They call them UAPs. And when you hear about UAPs on the news, they're talking about UFOs. UFO stood for Unidentified Flying Object, and UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena.
Good job, Bill. Excellent work.
Thank you. Yeah, every pastor should have a butler and a shofar. Oh, well. So, when it comes to UFOs and UAPs, UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. What's the story? What's the deal about this? I mean, people for centuries have been seeing things in the sky. In fact, I can show you, and you can find them all over the place, paintings from the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century in churches, some of them, that show images in the sky with little people, or a person, maybe not human, but a being inside of this craft. And people snicker, and they say, yeah, little green men. But put the next slide up, Angie. We find that the government has disclosed, I believe it was June the 21st of this year, the government has disclosed reports on unidentified flying objects, UAPs. And in this report, They have all types of military information, and the military says that they have actually tracked these devices, and that many of them can go from a standing still position to 10,000 miles per hour in a split second, which lets us know that there's no man inside of there, because if he were, he would be pulverized up against the side of the craft. Mankind cannot live in an environment that moves from nothing to 10,000 miles an hour in a split second. There is the story, thank you, Angie. There is the story of a military pilot. I watched this the other day. He had several jet fighters under his command. They were on a training mission, and this was just recently. And they spotted a UAP, and they tracked it on their radar, and it was being tracked from the ground for an extended period of time, to the point where he decided he was going to dive down and take a look at it and see what it was close up. And all of this is recorded. You can look it up. You can find it online. All of this was recorded on his equipment in his plane. But when he got down close to it, in an instant, it was gone. Now, we've reached a point where it's not a question of do they exist. It's a question of what are they? And as a Christian, we've got to determine within our hearts a reality of how this plays out with the Word of God and what it means to us. Now, we are in a time right now of what I call a time of disclosure. And there's a purpose for this. There's a purpose behind this. We are in a time of where we are gradually being shown that aliens are benevolent, that they're okay. Next slide. We have been shown in movies that wisdom they have. Everyone knows Yoda, the wisdom of Yoda. And Yoda is a fictional character, from Star Wars, but Yoda is different. He was not created in the likeness and image of God. You can see that. Next slide. We are being told through, this is from the movie Avatar, we are being told that there are other creations, and there are, but we are being told that they interact with us in a peaceful way if we will allow them. And some of them become quite adorable. Yeah. I've known many people that don't look that good. But, next slide. But the reality in all of this is there is a group of beings that continually show up that are described as the Greys. And they abduct people. There are many, many, hundreds and hundreds of people who give an account, and all their accounts are very similar of how they are abducted. There's medical experiments that are performed on them. Many times they lose their memory. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they're deformed. Thank you, Angie. That's enough of that. But I want to take you through what the Bible has to say. And I think if we look at what the Bible has to say, we're going to learn a lot. Okay? Are you ready? You got your seatbelt on, you're strapped in. Now, a good friend of mine, in fact, we went to Europe together and just a couple of years ago and discovered the tombs of the giants. We went into the largest underground palace in the world. Over 30,000 skeletons were brought out of this palace. It's completely underground. L.A. Marzulli, and he wrote a book called The 70-Year Cover-Up Exposed, UFO Disclosure. And actually, we have this online and in our bookstore. If you want to delve deeper into some of this disclosure, L.A. Marzulli is a spirit-filled Christian who loves Jesus, all right? I was on the island of Malta with him speaking at an evangelical church. I was speaking there the Sunday before, but then he spoke at the midweek service and he talked about UFOs for an hour and 9 people got saved. I mean, so when salvation comes from this study, there's a purpose. If all we're wanting to do is just feel like we've come back from the twilight zone after church today, we haven't accomplished much, you know. So let's take a look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness, where? In the heavenly places. Now, a question that's always asked me, anytime this comes up, is, are these beings that are involved in the sightings, are they good or are they bad? Are they of God or are they of the devil? Well, I think that question can't be answered yes or no or right or left or whatever, because it depends on who it is. It depends on which being it is. Because some beings from the spirit realm represent God. They are messengers. They are angels. They're angelic beings. But some beings from the spirit world do not represent God. In fact, we find in 2 Corinthians, I believe it is, but there's a place where Paul said, I don't want you to be deceived in the same way that Eve was deceived in the garden. And that you might be drawn away from the simplicity that's in Christ. Well, that doesn't mean Christ is simple. That just means the gospel that he teaches is not complicated. And anytime we start complicating things, that's not God. God is easy to understand, regardless of your intellectual level, regardless of how many degrees you have. You can have so many degrees that they call you Dr. Fahrenheit. But you can be stupid when it comes to the things of God. All right. 2 Corinthians 11:14. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. I like what another version of the Bible says. It says, and it is no wonder even Satan tries to make himself look like an angel of light. There are people who communicate with spirits through seances and various things. And there are people, you can look it up and read about it, there are people who communicate with aliens. You must have something different working inside of you if you ever communicate with a spirit. 1 Corinthians 12:10 says, and we've been studying this, talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. To another, the working of miracles. To another, prophecy. To another, discerning of spirits. Why would you need to discern spirits if all the spirits that are talking to you are good?
There you go.
Now, you need discerning of spirits because There are spirits that come to you appearing to be good that are not. See, that's what deception is. Deception means that the person being deceived doesn't think they're being deceived. They think they're right. I talked with a young man who said that he had been abducted by the aliens, by the Greys. He had not even told his parents about it. He wanted to meet with me to find out what I thought. He said they were some of the most loving creatures out there. And he said it really didn't hurt a lot when they injected those needles into me. The young man's deceived. There's nothing in the Word of God that talks about how angels are going to abduct you and put needles into you. The very fact that that's what's happening lets you know you don't have to be great in discerning of spirits to figure out that's not God. And if it's not God, stay away from it. Are they real? Do they exist? We have to ask ourselves this question all the time. Yes, they are real, and yes, they do exist. You can take that to the bank. But what are they, and what is their purpose? Colossians 1:15. In the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, for by him, Jesus, the Word, all things were created. Okay, now listen to this. All things were created that are in heaven, that are on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. Jesus created everything that is created, seen and unseen, on earth and in the heavens. But we know that 1/3 of the heavenly host rebelled against God, and God cast them down to the earth and to the air around the earth. The air around the earth is considered to be, by the Hebrews, by the Jews, even by the ancient Greeks, the atmosphere, everything up to the tallest mountain, is considered to be heaven number one. When the Word of God says that he is the prince of the power of the air, he's not in God's heaven, but he is on the earth circulating. He is a prince. He's part of the principalities and powers of the air. And that is who, we read it a few moments ago, that's who we wrestle against. See, I've always been curious about weird things. I'd look in the mirror and I'd get curious. And I always said, if I had a chance to talk to God, I'm going to ask him about something. I'm going to ask him about the Nebula of Orion, the 17 trillion mile gap in space where there's nothing, that's shaped like a horse head. I'm going to ask him about the pyramids. I'm going to ask him about UFOs. I'm going to ask him about all these strange phenomena. And one night, several decades ago, I went to sleep and had a dream, a God dream. Not all dreams are of God, but this dream was of God. And in this dream, I was thrust in front of a brick wall that spanned quite a distance on either side. It went very high, and at the end of the wall, it had little wings that went back like this. And I noticed that on the other side of the wall that there was kind of like a light. And the light kept getting brighter and brighter, so bright that it was shining around the wall, and it got so bright that I couldn't see my hands. And I remember thinking to myself in my dream, I was thinking, this must be what happened to Paul, on the road to Damascus. The light shined and it was so bright he was blinded. And I was thinking, I'm going to be blind. And then my lightning fast brain in my dream made me realize that the light on the other side of the wall was God. And I dropped to the floor, and it was like a granite floor. I dropped to the floor, and I tried to crawl into it. I tried to get lower than the floor because it was God on the other side. I mean, that was like God. And so I'm laying down there, and then he tells me to get up. And he says he's going to answer all my questions. And he told me, in my dream, he told me, what about the pyramids of Egypt? Who really built them? What about the fossils that they find that are 20 million years old? What about the Nebula of Orion and the gap in space? And he was telling me this. Excuse me. And as he was telling me, every time he would tell me something, I remember thinking, is that all it is? Oh my goodness, that's a simple answer. And he'd give me another answer. And it was just so peaceful. And it's like, cool. I know the answers to all these things. I know the answers. And I woke up, and when I woke up, I knew the answers. And I said to Loretta, get me a pen and pencil. I'm going to write this down. And I couldn't find a paper and pencil. And so finally, I found a paper, but I couldn't find a pencil, or vice versa. I don't remember which. But it was kind of like all these answers were birds in a bird cage. But somebody'd left the door open to the bird cage, and there went one bird. Well, I still got all these other answers, And then I'm looking for the pencil, and there goes another bird. And I finally got the pencil, and I sat down on the edge of the bed with my pencil and paper, and all the birds were out of the cage. But from that day, decades ago, until now, I have such peace. Knowing, the knowing stayed here. Knowing that God's got all this in the palm of his hand. And it's nothing for us to get stressed out about. I mean, the answers, come on. When we get to glory, he's going to tell you, and the answers are so simple. It's kind of like the gospel. The gospel is simple. It takes a preacher to complicate it. Well, let's take a look at a very common scripture in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 1:4. Now I'm going to read this to you. It's rather lengthy, several verses, but I think we need to. Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, radiating out of its midst like the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. And from within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings, and on their 4 sides each of the 4 had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, each one had the face of a man. Each of the 4 had the face of a lion. And on the right side, each of the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the 4 had the face of an eagle. Now, this is almost exactly the same as the 4 creatures described in Revelation chapter 4. there's a slight variation. But I propose this. Even if they're not the same creatures, they're of the same order. Are you following me? They're of the same order. Thus were their faces, their wings stretched upward. 2 wings of each touched one another, and 2 covered their bodies. And each one went straight forward. They went wherever the Spirit wanted to go, and they did not turn as they went. So, in other words, when they moved, they did not turn. Are you following me? As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire. Like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and out of the fire went lightning. And the living creatures ran back and forth in appearance like a flash of lightning. Now, as I looked at the living creatures, behold, a wheel was on the earth, beside each living creature with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workings. Okay, let's stop there for just a moment. When it said, let's ask ourselves a question here. We're actually seeing what the Hebrew word here is Merkavah. We're seeing, which is, by the way, the same name that the Israelis give their tanks in the military right now. If you look at a tank, that's a Merkavah. So this was a Merkavah. And it says, the appearance of their wheels and their workings. Now, I know you can get thrown out of some churches for talking about this kind of stuff. But the fact that it says, and their workings, if you look it up and read it in context in the original language, you're going to find out it's mechanical. Now, if you want to ask yourself this question, why would spirits from heaven, angels from heaven, why would they need anything mechanical? Are you following me? Because I thought an angel could just wave his hand and do whatever he wanted and snap his fingers and be wherever he wanted. And but no, there's wheels and the workings of them. There's mechanics involved. Let me ask you something. We were created in the likeness and image of God. Agreed? And what is God? I'll tell you what, one thing God is. God's a creator. We read a verse a few moments ago. Everything that you see and everything you don't see and everything in heaven and everything on earth was created by the Word of God for Jesus, by Jesus. God is a creator. And we were created in His image and His likeness. Who's not to say that there's technology in heaven? Who can doubt that creation, do you think everything in existence that can be created is already created? Or do you think God still has things He could create even through His church? Well, think about it. Why do we need this 94 billion light year across universe that we have now? Why do we need that? Because you're going to live a long time. If you're a born again believer, you're going to live not millions, not trillions. You're going to, 1 trillion to the trillionth power years. And I believe that the universe, possibly even the universes, have been created as a place for God's image to be like God. You know, Ephesians 5:1 says that we are to imitate God. Very clear. It says, imitate God as dear children. In the same way children imitate their parents, you imitate your father. You imitate God. What's God? God's a creator. Is it possible that there's a place in one of the universes, that there are places where nothing has been created yet? Just waiting for Penny Maroney for 3 billion years from now to sashay over to that little place and decide, I'm going to think about something that I've never thought about before. I'm going to create something. Listen, the vastness of God is beyond description. And we limit him, and we limit eternity so much. And the appearance of the wheels and their workings was like the color of beryl. And all four had the same likeness. Their appearance of their workings was, as it were, a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Show the next slide. I personally think that when Ezekiel saw this, that it was kind of like something he'd never seen before. I don't think that image reflects the true astonishment on his face when he's seeing this. Because what we've described so far is way out there. Now, it says that there was a wheel within a wheel. How many of you as children played with gyroscopes? And what is a gyroscope? It is a wheel within a wheel. It is the little device that keeps airplanes level. It's the little device that can, no matter how you move it, it can go any direction. It doesn't have to turn. Well, just something to think about, you know. There was a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Oh, Angie, go ahead and put the next graphic up, just to kind of give people an idea of, there are so many artist renditions of what this looked like. And, but you know, the Bible talks about how their wings spread this and a wheel within a wheel. But you know what? This is what he thought when he saw it. And he described it in the best way he could describe it, knowing what he knows for that day. It's kind of like on the day of Pentecost, when it says, in the upper room, there was the sound of a mighty rushing wind. It doesn't say there was a mighty rushing wind. It says there was the sound like a mighty rushing wind. Well, why did they say mighty rushing wind? Why didn't they say it sounded like a jet turbine? Because they didn't know what a jet turbine was. Are you following me? Why didn't they say it sounded like 10 race cars at NASCAR coming around the corner? Because those things didn't exist at that time. So you got to understand, when Ezekiel is talking about this, he's using the best verbiage he can use for the day he lives in and for what his understanding of things were. When he saw a wing, he saw like a wing. When you think of a wing, what do you think of? Well, I was on a 747 Boeing, and the wing I saw didn't have feathers. If somebody says to me, that looks like a wing, I would think about the wing on an airplane. Why? Because that's the culture I'm living in. So, it's not necessarily exactly the way he describes it, because he's describing it the best he can with the knowledge he understands. See, if I saw a wheel within a wheel spinning, I would say, well, there's a gyroscope. He just says, as it were, a wheel within a wheel. Okay, let's go here. When they moved, they went toward one of four directions. They did not turn aside when they went. As for their rims, they were so high, they were awesome. And their rims were full of eyes all around, the four of them. When the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went, because their spirit went. and the wheels were lifted together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When those went, these went. When those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The likeness of the firmament above the heads of the living creatures was like the color of an awesome crystal, stretched out over their heads. And under the firmament their wings spread out straight toward one another. Each one had two which covered one side, and each one had two which covered the other side of the body. When they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of many waters, like the noise of the Almighty, a tumult like the noise of an army. When they stood still, they let down their wings. A voice from above the firmament that was over their heads, whenever they stood, they let down their wings, and above the firmament over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in the appearance of a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was the likeness and appearance of a man, high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist and upward I saw as it were the color of amber, with the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward I saw as it were the appearance of fire, with brightness all around. Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Yud He Vav He. So when I saw it, I fell on my face, as I heard a voice of one speaking. That reminded me of when I fell on my face. Wow. What was that? Why, when the appearance of the Lord showed up, why was he was seated on something? Looked like a throne. Fire all around. Rainbow. Noise. Noise, the way he describes it, like an army in battle. Let's take a look at Zechariah chapter 5, verse 1. Then I turned and raised my eyes and saw there a flying scroll. A flying scroll. Wow. I don't know if you've noticed, but I looked up several pictures of what people believe that they have seen. Some are disc-shaped. Some are like tubular and long. And he said to me, "What do you see?" So I answered, "I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits and its width is 10 cubits. Okay, 20 cubits is 30 feet. 10 cubits is 15 feet. So this scroll was about from here to that wall in length, and about from here to the back of the stage in width, and it was a scroll. It was circular. And so it was when they had crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you?" Elisha said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." So he said, "You have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so." Then it happened, as they continued on and talked, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen." So he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes and tore them into two pieces. Why was a chariot needed? And why would it be called a chariot of fire? Because the chariots that they had at the time of Elijah and Elijah didn't have fire. They just had wheels and they were pulled along. Where does the fire come in? And what about the horses? You got to understand, once again, he is using terminology that he's familiar with. Once again, it lets us know that there are devices, traveling devices, that come out of heaven, and this is on the good side. Are you following me? This is angelic beings of God. This is the Lord appearing. What does the devil do? John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. He is a deceiver, and he mimics the things of God. We operate in the gifts of the Spirit. The enemy works in seances. We read the Bible. The enemy reads a Ouija board or Anton LaVey's book or something. Wow. 2 Kings chapter 6. Oh my. You never can get too much Bible, can you? I'll be quick with this. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. And the man of God, okay, I'm going to condense this. What happened was the king of Syria was going to attack Israel, but every time he went to attack Israel, Israel knew in advance about the attack, and they either avoided the attack or won. And the king of Syria is saying, how do they know this? Do I have a spy in my own camp? And one of his assistants to the king says, look, there's a prophet in the land of Israel, and he's telling the king of Israel everything that you do, even in your bedroom. So the king of Syria basically says, let's go get this guy. Let's go to verse 14. Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, the servant said to the prophet, alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, here's what the prophet said, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those with them. And I'm sure that the servant said, okay, 10,000 out there, 1, 2. You know, he couldn't figure it out. Then Elisha prayed and said, here's what he said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Here's those chariots of fire again. Now, let's clear up something else. When Moses went up onto the mountain for 40 days, the scripture tells us in another place that everything that was to be in the tabernacle, everything, was shown to him in heaven as a pattern so that he would know what to build when he came back to earth. In other words, earth is a pattern of heaven. What we have here in the visible realm is there in the invisible realm, only what we have is a scaled down, cut back imitation version. When Jesus put his blood on the Ark of the Covenant, the Bible tells us in Hebrews that he put his blood on the original Ark of the Covenant in heaven, and not the imitation that was here on earth made with human hands. Are you following me? The one on earth that had the blood of bulls and goats put on it for decades, for a long time. The one in heaven had never had blood placed on it at all. It was waiting for the perfect blood. So the perfect blood on the perfect altar was the real thing. On earth was the imitation, which was the earthly altar made out of earthly substances with earthly blood on it. I propose to you that the chariots that they were using on earth were just imitations of the magnificent chariots that are in heaven, that the enemy is trying to imitate and copy and draw us away from the original. You know why there's so many false religions on the earth? Because the enemy makes a counterfeit of everything that God does. But you know how you discover a counterfeit bill? They discovered this many years ago. They would go into a bank. You don't show them the counterfeit bill and say, study these. This is what a counterfeit bill is. No, they show them the real bill. You study the real bill. You look at this real bill, the authentic, the original. You study it. You look at it. You look at it. You look at it. Then when you see the imitation, you spot it right off. That's what Christians need to do. We need to study the Word of God, get into the things of God, and then when this false stuff comes along, it's obvious. 1 Corinthians 14:33. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And when things seem confusing, it's not God. Luke 10:17. Then the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I personally believe that's where the earth got its shift. You know, as a pilot, you know that true north and magnetic north are not the same. They're off. And science tells us that the earth at one point in time was hit by something really big and it shifted on its axis. Well, you can go out here and find craters that are miles across, but when you find the meteorite that hit the crater that caused it, the meteorite may be no bigger than a bowling ball. Somebody said, well, how can something that small make a crater that big? It's not the size, it's the velocity. And I believe that when Jesus saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning, when you have a cherub that hits the earth at 299 million meters per what? 186,000 miles per second. You have a cherub hit the earth at that velocity? I believe that's what caused the first flood. Okay. Jesus went on to say, behold, I give you authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Do not be afraid of a UFO. If a little gray appears to you and says, and instead of saying, take me to your leader, say, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you. In other words, don't go on a demon hunt. You know how many demons are on the earth right now? The same number that were on the earth when Jesus was here. Some of them have been cast out so many times that they go, okay, now, you know. You don't cast, you know, I was in a Bible study once at my own house, and this woman says, and demon of whatever, she was seeing demons everywhere. I think this one was the one that was in her well. I cast you back to hell from whence you came. That sounded good, but whence? That's a Bible word, whence. Well, that demon had never been to hell. What do you mean from whence you came? No. If you cast a demon out, what you do is you cast it out, but it's still here. The Bible says he wanders around looking, you know, looking for a place to land. Just keep your own house clear. Okay. You guys still do love me, right? 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. You know, this morning, as we were getting ready for church, Loretta said to me, she said, you know what the New Testament calls Christians, you know, when it really says Christian, it's not, the word's really not Christian. It's anointed one. We are the anointed ones. And we carry his anointing. And there should be no fear in us. You know, test the spirits. If a little ship lands in your backyard tomorrow, and I'll tell you what, there's several people in this church that have seen unidentified flying objects to the point where they know they're there. I know you're out there. I know who you are. But if somebody lands and ask him, is Jesus Christ of Nazareth your Lord? Just ask him. They go, well, I don't know. Well, say, if you don't know, then I cast you out in the name of Jesus. Go. Because you've been given authority over all the principalities and powers of the air. So, to sum it up, let's just say this. If somebody asks you, do UFOs or UAPs, as they're called now, do they exist? Yes, they exist. I mean, there is evidence that they exist. Somebody may say, well, that's just on radar, and that's just on screen. Well, you know, we trust our radar and our screens for everything else we see in space. Why don't we trust the radar and the videos for what we see in our own atmosphere? Do you think all these military pilots, airline pilots, do you think they're all nuts? You think they're just, no. Did they see something? Yes, they saw something. What did they see? I don't know what they saw, but what I do know is what they saw is real. Now there's people out there, of course, that make up stuff. You know, there's phony baloney stories, okay? But there are real ones. But you have not been given a spirit of fear. That's what I want to impart to you today. You have not been given a spirit of fear. And you, as a born-again believer, you have authority over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means harm you. Take authority. Take your authority. You are an anointed one. Say this, I am anointed. I have authority over all the power of the enemy. And no UFO, no UAP will ever scare me, because I have not been given the spirit of fear. Wow. Father, in the name of Jesus, we give you all the glory. And Father, I just pray today that this information about your word will encourage us to dig deeper into your word and understand the glory and the magnificence you have for us for all eternity. Bless these your people. In the name of Jesus, amen. Now, you do need to understand this. You don't know what you don't know. And you don't understand what you can't understand. But what you can understand is this. God's word is true. God does not lie. And he's given you authority. And I know we have a lot of people around the world that, because I said I was going to talk about UFOs, are tuning in. My mailbox was full of people saying, we're going to see what you have to say about UFOs today. But there's been a lot of fear out there. I want to add this note. I believe what the enemy is doing is building up he's conditioning the populace to believe so strongly in UFOs and abductions and that they are normal. Now, I did hear a military general say this. I heard it with my own ears. He said, the reason we're not doing anything about UAPs right now is because their technology is obviously so far beyond ours that we are like ants to them. And there's nothing that we could do to counteract the technology that we have, to attack the technology that we've discovered that they have. So that's the government's answer to why they're not doing anything about it. I believe it was Senator Harry Reid. I think it was Harry Reid who called for a full disclosure of all the evidence that the military had. And it came out. It came out. I believe that was in that June 21 report of this year. And, even senators have trouble getting information. But I believe that there is a conditioning of the populace so that when the rapture takes place, and in an instant, we're all gone, that they can write it off as a mass abduction. They don't really probably want to get into the thing and say it was all the evangelicals that got abducted. They're blaming, this is like, to a degree, it's kind of like Nazi Germany right now in some respects with the news media. I heard this week, Loretta and I were blessed to be able to have a dinner meeting with Nikki Haley and Ted Cruz last weekend in Texas. And, there's just a lot of interesting things going on right now. The news media said, and I heard this myself, that the pandemic is being caused right now. It's being expanded because of the evangelicals. And they use that word, the evangelical Christians. Well, it took me back. We have a man that's been coming to our church on Thursday night. You remember his first name? Huh? Gunther. Is Gunther here today? Oh, there's Gunther back there. Gunther, stand up. Stand up. You are seeing there a World War II Nazi survivor. Was it Auschwitz? Auschwitz that he was in. He wrote a book, by the way, we've got it up in our bookstore if we're not sold out already, called Both Sides of the Wall. Yeah. Both sides of the wall. Life on both sides of the wall. But what happened in Nazi Germany in World War II was everything that happened bad, they said the Jews did it. Something happened bad. Well, the Jews did it. And they started building up this feeling that the Jews were responsible for everything. And now what we're beginning to see is the news media is beginning to say evangelicals are responsible for things. It's stupid stuff. How can evangelicals be responsible for COVID-19? Okay? But there are those out there that hear that. And we all know this. If you say a lie enough times, no matter how stupid the lie is, you just keep saying it and keep saying it and keep saying it and keep saying it. Eventually people will think, well, there must be something to that. So I love you all.